Welcome back, folks, to a guide to everything that the stealth skill in Pathfinder 2e has to offer. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be covering everything about the stealth skill, including all of its base uses, its skill feats, and even some of the basic observation and senses rules that you'll need to know if you're trying to hide from someone. Since I don't want to bore you with this, let's just jump right into things. The first use for the stealth skill is pretty simple. Concealing an object. You've all been in a situation where you need to hide some weapons or an important object from someone, and this is specifically for that situation. It might be something as general as you always hide a dagger on your person, so in case you need it, you can always have a weapon, or it could be something like you need to sneak into a party and you want to bring some special supplies or a scroll or whatever. And conceal an object is designed for that situation. It takes a single action, and your GM rolls a secret stealth check to hide a small object, so that's probably going to be a light or smaller object. That check is then compared against anyone around yours perception DC. If your stealth check is higher than their perception DC, they don't see the object, but if it's lower, then they notice it. If someone specifically searches you for a hidden object, regardless of whether or not you passed or failed, then they get a perception roll against your stealth check to see if they noticed it. So even if you beat their passive perception DC, then they can still try and roll to see if they notice it. You can also put things in the environment using the exact same rules, which is pretty useful if you need to stash something somewhere and then come back at a later time to grab it. Also, you'll always be able to beat your party's perception DC if you have some time, since while it is a secret check, if you roll that secret check and then everyone else in the party says, hey, you did a really bad job of hiding that, try again, you can keep on trying if you have the time until you can beat everyone in the party's perception DC. So it is pretty useful if you're going to be sneaking into a party because no one can horrifically mess it up. Now, it might still not beat the people in the party's perception DC, but at the very least it'll beat the rest of the parties. Now we're getting into the really central elements of stealth. Hiding so you don't get targeted by things. Hiding is a single action that you can take as long as you have normal or greater cover, or if you have concealment. And some forms of concealment do specifically say that you cannot hide using them, like the blur spell. Once you fulfill those conditions, then you spend an action and your GM rolls a secret stealth check. And if you're benefiting from any cover, then you get the cover bonuses to your stealth check, which is great. You then compare that result against anyone who is observing you's perception DC. If you succeed, then you are now hidden from that target until you lose the cover that's shielding you or the concealment. This is just hidden, meaning that they know exactly which square you're in, but they still have to succeed on a DC 11 flat check to directly target you. This is great for a bit of survivability, and it's pretty useful for further stealthy activities. Also, if you attack someone directly after you hide, then they are flat-footed until after the strike, so it's a great way to get flat-footed at range for, say, a ranged rogue. But if you do anything other than step, sneak, or hide again, then you immediately become observed. Basically, the instant you attack or cast a spell, it's immediately gone. Also, keep in mind that you are going to be hiding from your allies as long as they are also getting cover from you, so it might be a little annoying if you need to get healed if you hide, because now your cleric can hardly even know where you are. So do keep it in mind that it is something that goes both ways. Combining the hide action with the sneak action is where things get fantastic for the stealth skill, so we need to talk about the sneak action. It is a one-action activity where once you spend it, you move half your speed, whether that be a land speed or any other type of movement. This does mean that you cannot sneak unless you have a movement type of that kind, so it means you cannot sneak while climbing or swimming, unless you have a climb or a swim speed, which is a little bit difficult, but you can work around it. At the end of your movement, so at the end of half of your speed, you roll a secret stealth check, or rather your GM rolls one. If you had cover or greater cover throughout your entire movement, like if you're moving behind a wall or something like that, then you get a bonus on your check which is fantastic because a big bonus on your stealth check is going to greatly increase your chances of succeeding. You then compare your stealth check, or rather your GM does this, you compare their stealth check to every single person who could observe you. If you beat their perception DC, then you are now undetected to that target, meaning that they have legitimately no idea where you are. They know that you're around, but they don't know remotely what square you're in, which direction you're in from them. They know nothing. Although the instant that you do anything but hide, sneak, or step, you are instantly spotted. Unless if you attack, then they are flat-footed to your attack until you, hit them, and then you are now observed. You might be able to do some other actions while remaining undetected, but it's up to your GM and will probably need another stealth roll. For example, you might be able to open up a door while you're being sneaky, which is not a hide, sneak, or step, but you can still roll a stealth check to try and do that quietly to not give away your position. So it's something that you need to keep in mind, that it will be hard to do things other than hide whenever you're being stealthy. If you fail against someone's perception DC, then you give away at least some of your position, making you only hidden instead of undetected. This is still pretty good, since a DC 11 flat check to target you is generally fantastic, though it is lost the instant that you lose your cover or are no longer concealed. If you critically fail against someone's perception DC, then you really mess up and become spotted, meaning that you're fully observed. This is obviously not ideal, and hopefully you don't do this against everyone's perception DC, or otherwise you're just completely out of luck. But, you take what you can get. There's always going to be a risk of failure, but the odds of you critically failing are generally going to be pretty low as long as you've got a decent proficiency and a decent dex. Also, if you're trying to sneak around while a target legitimately cannot perceive you, like if they are blind, or if you are invisible, then if you critically fail on your check to sneak, you instead get a failure, making you only hidden instead. Also, this is just a pretty blanket rule that I feel like I should mention, which is that the hide and sneak actions as they are currently written are based around visual perception. So if you're dealing with something that is blind but has something like echolocation, or if it has tremor sense, then these rules don't work nearly as well. If it's echolocation, then you might get cover in a noisy room, or you might stuff like that, where the rules need to be adjusted depending on what situation you're in and what you're trying to hide from. There is a list of specific rules on how to deal with extra senses, because you can take precautions against those. Generally, it's just if you know about it, you come up with something that makes sense, and then your GM might slightly adjust the roll. So if you're trying to hide from something that can sense heartbeats, then that is probably going to be a wisdom-based stealth check rather than a dexterity-based stealth check. Anyways, that is actually all of the basic actions of stealth. None of them require that you're actually trained in stealth, but if you're trying to succeed on them, then you want to be trained. Anyway, let's move on to all of the different skill feats. Experienced Smuggler is fantastic for making sure that nobody finds anything that you're hiding, though it doesn't actually help you if you're being actively searched, oddly enough. Whenever your GM rolls the secret check to hide an item using the hide an object basic action, then they use the result of the secret roll, or 10, whichever is higher, and then they add your proficiency like normal. Once you're a master in stealth, then they automatically use a result of 15, or whatever they rolled if it's higher. And if they're legendary, then they don't actually roll immediately, because you automatically succeed on hiding objects from passive observers. This doesn't impact you if you're being actively searched, though. Like if you're hiding weaponry from a bouncer and the bouncer does their job and actually just pats you down, then you still have to use the original secret roll that was made to determine whether or not they find it. The interesting and kind of nebulous part of this feat is that it says that you get better jobs whenever you're using underworld lore to earn income. This is pretty specific, and it isn't explicitly stated out what it does, but it probably means that you're going to get higher level jobs whenever you use earning income. But it can also have some pretty interesting story aspects that is pretty fun. If someone has this feat, then they might get actively sought out by people for moving around objects that they don't want people to find, which is a fantastic way to start up a storyline in-game, so it's a great GM tool. The impact of Terrain Stalker will be very different depending on where your campaign is taking place. Once you take this feat, you choose either the rubble, snow, or underbrush terrains. While you're in that terrain, which is almost certainly going to be difficult terrain by the way, because all of those are generally difficult terrain, you can sneak without rolling a perception check, as long as you move only 5 feet and your enemies don't know that you're there. If you do so, then you basically auto-succeed on it, as long as you don't end within 15 feet of a non-ally. This is going to be pretty good whenever you know that you're going to be dealing with relatively static sorts of terrain. If you're in an Arctic campaign and you know that you're going to be around snow a ton, then choosing snow is a great option because you know you're going to be able to use it frequently. But if you're only around snowy areas some of the time, then it's going to be a lot less useful. This is pretty similar for Undergrowth because that works great in densely forested areas but not in out of densely forested areas. And Rubble is probably the most situational one of them all, because you'll be able to find it in mountains and dilapidated parts of cities and ruins, but those aren't going to be nearly as common as simple elements of natural environments, which you're going to be running into a lot if you're in those environments. Overall, it's a very situational feat that really depends on where your campaign is taking place. If you can get to use it though, then being able to sneak up on people basically for free is going to make your life a ton easier. And it's going to save your GM having to make a lot of secret checks. Also, I feel like I should mention it because I forgot to earlier, you can take this feat multiple times to take the other types of terrain, but it's up to you whether or not you feel that's actually worth it. The Armored Stealth feat is a bit of a weird one. It requires that you're an expert in stealth, and then you reduce the armor check penalty of your armor specifically to stealth by 1. If you're a master, then you reduce it by 2, and if you are a legendary in stealth, then you reduce it by a total of 3. If you're wearing armor that has the noisy trait, then you don't get those benefits, and instead you just negate the noisy trait, meaning that you reduce your armor check penalty like normal by having a sufficient strength score. The reason why I say that this is in a weird place is because most characters don't have armor check penalties when they're using their armor in the first place, because they're going to be picking armor that they meet the strength requirement for. Also, most characters that are going to be using stealth frequently, and who probably increase this to an expert skill, are going to have a good dexterity, which means that they in all likelihood are going to be using light armor, which already has a low armor check penalty and doesn't have the noisy trait, or has a strength requirement of 10, which most characters are able to fulfill very easily. Basically, this is predominantly meant for people who are going to be wearing heavy armors, who don't want to be at a disadvantage at being stealthy, which is going to be some very specific sorts of characters. If you are that character, then this is absolutely fantastic. But if you aren't, then it basically has no purpose. For a while, I didn't see the point of the Quiet Allies feat, but now I really do see the light. Whenever your allies are using the Follow the Expert exploration activity to try and be stealthy and you're trying to avoid notice, you can roll once as a group to see if you get spotted, rather than every single person rolling once. If you do get into combat, then you do all roll separately again, because you can't all go on the same initiative, that'd be weird, but this is fantastic. The reason why I didn't see the light for a while is because I just thought, well, it's about the same, because if you're all rolling, then you're all gonna, on average, roll about a 10. But the thing is, you don't actually average it really for this, because all you need to get spotted is one person to roll bad. And with 4 different people in your party or more, then the odds of one person rolling bad is pretty high. Think about it this way. Would you rather roll once, or roll 4 times and take the lowest result? You're obviously going to want to take the roll once option, which is Quiet Allies. This does require that you're using Follow the Expert, but stealth is easily the most common thing that people use Follow the Expert for in the first place, so this is absolutely amazing. Shadowmark is a little specific, but it's fantastic at the job that it sets out to do. It's all about stalking down one particular person. Whenever you're avoiding notice and are following one specific person, then you can give them a -2 circumstance penalty on their perception DCs to spot you specifically. A -2 is pretty huge, and it increases by 1 whenever you hit Master and Legendary Proficiency, which makes you even better at tailing them. A -4 to their Perception DC whenever you are Legendary means that they are very unlikely to notice you. If you do end up in combat, then they also take this penalty on their Perception DC to see if they actually notice you once you start the combat. If you know that you're going to be following people often, then this is a fantastic feat, even if it won't help you all that much if you're following more than one person at a time. Fane's Escape is a pretty unusual, uncommon feat, but it's honestly a pretty funny one. It takes 2 actions and requires that you have a full deck of cards on your person, but then you fan out the cards and make them explode across the room, temporarily making yourself hidden and giving you a free sneak action. Also, you can sneak again if you still have the actions before your turn ends, if you aren't behind cover yet. It's basically a very quick get-out-of-jail-free card, though it is fairly situational and you have to take a couple of minutes getting all of your cards off the ground if you want to do it again. But it's really fun, and if you are making a lot of use out of cards already, like if you have the Fane's Fabri, Rogue, or Swashbuckler feat, then you can get a lot of use out of this. Now we are going to be getting into the crazy stuff, because all of the Master and Legendary Stealth skill feats are incredibly useful. And Foil Senses is going to be dealing with an issue that you're going to be running into by this point, because the more and more levels that you get, the more and more creatures will have weird senses like Tremor Sense, or ways of just knowing where you are. Normally, you have to take countermeasures against those senses, but to do that, you have to know that they exist first. You have to be able to see the creature, then recall knowledge to know what senses it has. With Foil Senses, you automatically are taking all of those countermeasures, even if you don't know that that sense exists currently, or are even aware that there is a creature nearby. Basically, you are constantly trying to hide from every single type of sense in the entire game. Now your GM might say that some things are impossible to avoid, like say, Spirit Sense. You can't hide your soul from existence. But from pretty much everything else, you're gonna be good. And I feel like I should go a little bit more into depth here than I did earlier because it matters, but countermeasures are basically specific types of things you do to avoid particular senses. To avoid Tremor Sense, you might be trying to step specifically lightly to avoid giving off any sort of vibrations, or you might be slowing down your heartbeat to avoid a Banshee's ability to sense heartbeats. And you can change up the ability on stealth if it seems appropriate. With Foil Senses, you are going to be doing this literally any single time you're trying to be quiet, which is a really fun feat that allows you to continue using stealth at high levels whenever things have all kinds of weird senses. Swift Sneak is one of those fates that almost feels necessary, even though it is extraordinarily simple. Once you take it, whenever you take this sneak action, you move at your full speed instead of half speed. This vastly improves your options of where you can go whenever you're trying to be sneaky, and it's honestly fantastic and I love it. Also, while it isn't explicitly stated, I feel like it's fair to ask your GM if this would allow you to move at full speed while using the Avoid Notice exploration activity, since if you can sneak at full speed in combat, I feel like you should be able to sneak at full speed out of combat. Legendary Sneak is the capstone legendary feat for the stealth skill, and it is a doozy like most legendary feats. You're now so good at stealth that you can hide literally anywhere and are basically assumed to be stealthy at all times. You no longer need to be concealed or be behind cover to use the hide or sneak actions, since you're so good at hiding that you can vanish into any sort of environment regardless of being noticed or being in the middle of an open field. Also, if you're using any exploration activity other than Avoid Notice, you can also get the benefits of Avoid Notice without being stealthy, or rather, it's that your existence is already so stealthy that you get the benefits regardless. This is a fantastic feat, and being able to ghost out of sight in the middle of a street in broad daylight while being observed is absolutely fantastic. And plus, your initiatives are going to be fantastic from all times now because you're going to be a legendary in stealth, and you're also always going to be avoiding notice, so your initiative is going to be amazing. Overall, a very, very, very good legendary feat. As you might have guessed by now, I personally feel that stealth is a great skill that was implemented wonderfully in Pathfinder 2e. It makes a lot of sense and it doesn't require a bunch of obtuse rules, and once you use it a couple of times, it gets pretty self-explanatory. The detected, concealed, hidden, and undetected conditions are fairly simple to use, and once you understand them and have used them a couple of times, everything just kind of slots into place. And it's pretty self-explanatory. To move around, you only have to learn 2 different actions, which is amazing compared to how 1E did stealth, where it was pretty complicated. Obviously, rogues are probably going to be getting the most out of stealth out of every single class, because being able to hide and then take a shot is one of the best ways to get a target to be flat-footed for a rogue at range to be able to use sneak attack. But any character with a decent dex can make fantastic use out of this skill. And you probably want at least one person in your party to be at the very least trained in it, because there's going to be a part in every single campaign where you need to be quiet. So having someone who can do that is an incredibly valuable role. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then a like and subscribe down below would be really helpful. And any comments that you leave down below would also be great, because if I messed anything up, then I want to know about it. I really do appreciate any form of constructive criticism or theories or your own thoughts that you leave down below, so I hope that you leave some. Happy holidays, or if you're watching this in some time that isn't December, or if you don't celebrate, then have a good day, and until I see you next, live a wonderful life.